So, good day. We're going to discuss creating conceptual framework and defining terms. So, our objective for today is one, construct conceptual framework based on research topic of interest, apply the appropriate definition of terms used in the study, and last part we have an examples. Every topic we have an example. So first, conceptual framework. The conceptual framework illustrates how a research problem will be investigated. So this is drawing. It is usually depicted using visual guides such as diagrams and chart in order to represent the main idea in a study. So a conceptual framework aims to explain the relationships and connections of concepts and the means of exploring the problem. It should be presented in the simplest way possible and must highlight the significance of the study, the assumptions of the researcher, and the theories from which the study was based. A conceptual framework can also be constructed by researchers when existing theories are insufficient or irrelevant in establishing structures and describing the research problem, coming from Adam from 2018. So conceptual framework, if we're talking about this one, this is actually a drawing represented by research. It must be significant to your study, and it is an assumption of the researcher and theories from the study was based. So take note, conceptual framework is a drawing and it must be based, you are going to base this one on your significance of the study and your assumption of your research. So the differences between conceptual framework and theoretical framework. So we have theoretical framework and conceptual framework. A theoretical framework and conceptual framework are similar, yet two distinct concepts. From Akentoll in 2015 states that the theoretical and conceptual framework serves as the same purpose in giving structure and direction to the study. In addition, both explain clearly the variables and concept in the study. Okay, that is theoretical framework. So it is two distinct concepts, similar, pareha. According to Emenda in 2014, a theoretical framework pertains to the theory where the researcher based their study. In research writing, it is best to present one major theory that will be used and two minor theories that supports the major theory. Theories help the researchers understand the phenomenon under the study. So this is theoretical framework. Actually, you're going to draw a design based from the theories created. So I have an example later on. On the other hand, the conceptual framework is founded on the theoretical framework of the study. It is the end result of the researcher's synthesis of related concept and perspective gathered from the different resources. So a conceptual framework, this is coming from different results. So that is why it is very important that you research a good related literature, okay, so that you can conceptualize your study para makabuhat ka og design concept on your study represented as drawing. So the table summarizes the key differences between the theoretical and conceptual framework. So take note, theoretical framework in a study is based on an existing theory or theories, like a theory of motivation. Okay, that is an example. So mag-base ka diha sa imong theory, sa imong drawing, sa imong design. The conceptual framework, on the other hand, is something you can develop yourself based on the theory. So we have here, so we have an example, theoretical framework, and we have conceptual framework. So first, let's go to theoretical framework, then conceptual framework. So theoretical framework presents a general or wide scope of related study, while conceptual framework pertains to more specific, narrow concept related to the study. So you go to adaptive from established and existing theories from literature, but on the conceptual framework you have constructed when existing theories are insufficient in explaining the study. So that is the conceptual framework. We have application of a certain theory. Then on the conceptual framework, we have integration of concepts and ideas gathered from different sources. Okay, we have a broad application and may extend from a certain study or research problem. On the conceptual framework, we have restricted to a certain study or research problem. Then evaluate theory in order to investigate suppositions about the research problem. By a conceptual framework, we have promotes the development of a theory that can be beneficial to researchers studying the same. So you've noticed that theoretical framework is based on existing theories and conceptual framework based on something you can develop yourself. So in your research study, do not use theoretical but use conceptual framework because that is your study. Do not base your theories on theoretical framework or other theories, but you're going to base your framework on your own concept. So we have here example of theoretical framework. So you've noticed on our example we have customer satisfaction. Under customer satisfaction, okay, so here example on how you can describe a compare definitions and theories. In this example, we focus on the concepts of customer satisfaction. So on your customer satisfaction, we have theories from Thomason from 2003 in his page 69. You have the definition of Zetham and Bittner 2003 in his theory on page 68, 86. So the Thomason definition is the most relevant to the aim of this study. Given the emphasis, it places the unconscious perception. So this is his customer satisfaction theory based from Thomason's. And then Thomason's customer satisfaction model. So on your theory, you have to explain. Okay, in theoretical framework, we have to explain why Thomason come up with this model. So in Thomason says, according to Thomason, both the so-called value proposition and other influences have an impact on final customer satisfaction. In his satisfaction model, figure 1, like, which later on I'm going to show, Thomason shows that word of mouth, personal needs, past experience, and making and public relations determine customer needs and expectations. These factors are compared to their experiences, and this comparison between expectations and experiences determines the customer's satisfaction level. Thomason model is important for this study. It allows us to determine both the extent to which companies X customers are satisfied and where improvements can be made. So this is Thomason's customer satisfaction. Okay, model. So word of mouth. We have here word of mouth. Word of mouth. We have personal needs. Personal needs. We have past experience. We have We have marketing and public relation. We have marketing public relation. Determines customer needs and expectation. Customer needs and expectation. So this is now satisfaction. Okay? So the comparison between expectation and experience. We have here expectation, experience. We have customer satisfaction. Okay, so this is example of theoretical framework. So constructing a conceptual framework. So we have here uh, Swain in 2015 states that the basic design components in the conceptual framework use boxes, lines, and arrows to explain the relationship of variables between discussed in the study. So boxes often represents variables. Take note, boxes often represents variable. Okay? Lines indicate a correlation between two variables. Linkage, correlation. Finally, arrows suggest cause and effects relation, starting from the independent variable to the dependent variable. So pointing the two variables, which are either dependent or independent variable. In some cases, double arrows are used, especially in business and experimental research studies. Take note that double arrow heads are used, especially in business and experimental research studies, to denote evaluation or revaluation. Okay, some of you passed already a theoretical framework, but take note, I only asked chapter 1, and some of you passed already a theoretical framework. Oh, sorry, conceptual framework. And I've noticed that you have a double arrow. Okay, so take note, double arrow heads are used specifically in business and experimental research studies. Why it is denoted evaluation or re-evaluation, balik-balik. Okay? So in your research, magbalik-balik di ay. So you have a result right away if we are talking about quantitative research. So Latham in 2005 suggests a systematic way of constructing a conceptual framework. It is recommended to begin with the building blocks, which are the main variables or constructs, then indicating relationship among the variables using lines or arrows. Other additional features such as mediating variables and context factors can also be added once the main structure is illustrated. So we have here Regional 2015 proposed a step-by-step in constructing a conceptual framework. So the following steps are as follows. Finalize the research topic first, as what you did. You have the problem. I hope you follow. Find a problem first. Get the gap. After getting the gap, create the sentences or a paragraph, and then after creating a sentences of an paragraph based from your topic problem, then you eliminate, create a title, and then conduct a literature review. If that title or if that research has a sources or literature sources or additional sources that you're going to base with. So all sources of information from the literature review must be scientific and reliable. It is highly recommended to use peer review and scientific journal since these are up to date. So kinahanglan up to date ang journal. Third, decide which variable are to be investigated based on the literature review. Identify the key variables based on your research problem and figure out how this might be interrelated. So fourth is construct the conceptual framework using the literature review. Take note, you have the step using the literature review that you have gathered. Construct the conceptual framework by emphasizing the main variable to be investigated. It should reflect how the entire research process will be unfold. So we have here an example. So the figure above shows the basic design of conceptual framework. So this represents the causal relationship between the independent variable. So we have here independent variable, which is the number of hours spent using social media, and the dependent variable, which is on the academic performance in the school. So the conceptual framework is using a dependent and independent variable. Why the number of hours is independent? Because what? Hours spent. No? Hours spent. Daghan mang oras. And then academic performance of the school, it's only one. How he is being performed. So dependent. The academic performance will depend on the number of hours spent. So we have here the conceptual framework shows a hypothetical study of different factors affecting customer satisfaction in a restaurant. So we have there are three independent variables. So what are these variables? Ambience of place, taste of food, and service of staffs. So the line suggests that the three variables are interconnected or related to the customer's satisfaction. However, the relationship to be dependent variable customer satisfaction varies according to the strength of relationship. So this might be caused by the context of the situation. So depende, it depends upon the the relationship of the three is the it's varies. Ambience, customer satisfaction. If you have three ambience on your restaurant, it depends upon the customer satisfaction. You have a variety of food, it depends upon the customer satisfaction. You have the service of staffs, you have different types of people doing service of your restaurant. It varies also on this customer satisfaction. So these are dependent and this is independent. So we have also an example of a conceptual framework. The conceptual model that will be used in this research study is the input, process, and output model, which shows the series of boxes that are connected to each other. Take note, in higher research, seldom use are the input and the process and the output. That includes the feedback. Okay? So, input, it's coming from the statement of the problem. Okay? So, if you have a good statement of the problem, you can indicate automatically a conceptual framework using the input process. Where this process came from? It is coming from how you gather your research study. Like example, we have an input. This is, as I said, this is coming from the statement of the problem. We have demographic profile of the respondents, age, gender, civil status, number of family members, residential type, the source of income, and so on. Statement of problem source, reasons of borrowing money from informal money lenders, the amount that the due, and so on and so forth. That is coming from your problem. And then how you gather this, that is your process. How you are going to evaluate the input. So when you gather this one, what are those resources? Questionnaire, interview, and tabulation. And thereafter you are processing. This is now the results of your research, the output. So input coming from the statement of problem, process, the gathering of materials, and then your result to understand the behavior of micro-entrepreneurship in order to, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that is your conceptual framework. So note, after illustrating the conceptual framework, the researcher must also explain it in writing to be clearly understood. This includes explaining the relationship between the variables. So these are your variables. These are your variables. These are your variables. These are your variables. So at the end, you are going to explain the relationship among the variables. Okay? So we have here definition third. The researcher defines terms in research to set boundaries on how specific terms are going to be used in the study. This is to ensure that the term will be defined uniformly and will not be interpreted differently. The definition of terms can be written either in paragraph or list format. So we have a conceptual and operational definition. Leary in 2012 stated that researchers use two kinds of definition in their study. The first kind of definition is the conceptual definition, which is easily described as the definition found in dictionary. However, take note, however, they are not specific enough to qualify for research purposes. For example, we can conceptually define stress as the state of mental or emotional tension. That is conceptual. If we are talking about the second of operational definition, would be definition operational. Okay, operational definition. It refers to how the certain concept was used or measured in a particular study. So using example, Bob, you can define stress as having the high score of a stress level questionnaire. So operational's definition are important research to replicate other studies in a certain terms. Okay, so we have here example of operational definitions: scholastic performance, conceptual. Okay, these are the terms, example terms: scholastic performance. You have temperature. You have financial literature, financial literacy. And conceptual definition: scholastic performance, a study progress in an academic program or level. In operational, average of accumulated scores in one grading period. So see the difference? Concept is a study progress in an academic program or level. That is conceptual. If we talk about operational, these scholastic performance are used in determining the result of your research. Okay, that is your operational. If we're talking about conceptual, a student progress and an academic progress, it is the same as dictionary, but it is different from your dictionary definition. The conceptual definition of your term should be related to your study. So like example, scholastic performance. How scholastic performance used on your study. Do not copy scholastic performance from the dictionary. What is the meaning of this? Temperature, warmness and coldness of things. If we're talking operational, the intensity of hotness in a substance or a body, measured by getting the average kinetic energy of molecules in a substance or body. So this is your operational. Financial literacy, ability of a person to understand and apply financial management skills. That is conceptual. If operational, average money allocated, budgeting, savings, borrowing, and spending. So definition is, if you're talking operational, definition of terms coming from your research which is used by your paper. Conceptual, it's the same. Okay, it is the same like dictionary, but it is in accordance to your research terminology and concept. Guidelines in writing definition terms. The following must be taken into consideration in writing definition terms. Avoid defining terms by merely repeating the word. Second, simple and familiar words are preferred in defining terms. Avoid the use of words that are too complex. It is to avoid misinterpretation in your study. Okay, it is clear enough that you are not going to use dictionary term. You're going to use in accordance to your research paper how that term used in your study. So the term defined should be arranged alphabetically from A to Z. Acronyms should be spelled out completely, especially if it is uncommon or will be used for the first time in the research paper. This is your guideline. Okay? Then steps in making a conceptual framework. So we have here a video on how to create a conceptual framework. That includes a step-by-step process and an example.
Today, we are going to discuss about how to create a conceptual framework. So, sa Tagalog, ito po yung tinatawag nating conceptual na palangkas. So, without further ado, simulan na natin. So, unang-una na dapat nating tandaan kapag gagawa tayo ng conceptual framework is, of course, we need to know the definition of conceptual framework. Ano ba yung conceptual framework? Unang-una, it represents the researcher's synthesis of literature on how to explain a phenomenon. Ibig sabihin, ito ang kumakatawan sa kabuuan ng literature review na ginawa mo so that you can explain the whole situation of your study. At dapat din natin tandaan na ang conceptual framework is the researcher's understanding of how the particular variables in study connect with each other. So, very much applicable kapag gumagawa ka ng quantitative research because yung conceptual framework yung dapat nating i-identify when creating conceptual framework in a quantitative study are the variables involved in the study. And to make it easier to understand, the conceptual framework, it serves as a map or rudder that will guide you towards realizing the objective. So map or rudder, so rudder is a guide. Kapag sumasakay tayo ng barko o yung aeroplano, merong part ng aeroplano or barko, yun yung tinatawag na rudder, which shows or which helps, which actually work to guide the airplane or a ship on its direction. Okay, so yun yung tungkol sa conceptual framework. And lastly, to generalize what is conceptual framework, it is primarily a conception or model of what is out there that you plan to study. Meaning we are expected, kapag sinabi natin conceptual framework, we are expected to create a graphical representation to represent the study that we are to undertake. Okay, so that is conceptual framework. Okay, so where should the conceptual framework be written? Saan ba dapat natin nilalagay ang conceptual framework, or where should the conceptual framework be put? So, the conceptual framework should be written after literature review within your methodology section. So, dapat yung conceptual framework natin ay nilalagay natin after the literature review. Sometimes hindi natin makikita within the methodology section based on template given by our professor. But the most important thing is that it should be located after the literature review. So, what is the difference of conceptual framework to theoretical framework? So, napaka-importante na i-discuss natin kung anong kaibahan ng conceptual framework to theoretical framework because most of the time, this conceptual framework and theoretical framework, ginagamit sila sometimes magkasabay pa itong ginagamit or sometimes merong conceptual framework at walang theoretical framework and merong theoretical framework at sometimes wala namang conceptual framework. So by the way, ano nga bang kaibahan nitong dalawa? Theoretical framework na studies based on an existing theory or theories. So, simple lang. Pag sinabi natin theoretical framework comes from the word theories, yung word na theoretical. So, syempre, yung paggawa natin ng framework or balangkas ay nanggagaling naman sa mga teorya na merong kaugnayan sa ating ginagawang investigasyon or research. However, kapag sinabi natin conceptual framework, on the other hand, is something that you can develop yourself based on this theory. So, kung mayroon kang mga teorya, gagawa ka ng mga konsepto. Yung mga konseptong yun, siyang gagawin mo ng conceptual framework. So, ganun lang kadali yung kaibahan ng conceptual framework at saka theoretical framework. Okay. So, simulan natin para nang sa ganun ay malinawan tayong lahat kung ano yung mga hakbang kung paano gumawa ng conceptual framework. Unang-una na dapat ating tandaan, we need to study our topic. So, of course, study your topic involves us to create our own literature review because the process of literature review gives you time to study your whole topic. Kaya kinakailangan study natin yung topic natin so that we can establish or we can identify the different concepts involving our study. And then after that one, you need to create a thesis statement. Thesis statement, by the way, when you say thesis statement, yung statement na nagre-represent ng idea or issue ng iyong research. So later on, I'll give you examples corresponding these different steps. So third step, identify the concepts involved in the study. Dapat nating alamin o dapat nating identify yung mga concepts na i-involve sa study natin. And then the fourth step would be for us to relate yung mga concepts na na-identify natin. You could get some scratch, pwede tayong kumuha ng scratch, tapos lalagyan natin mga arrows kung paano natin sila i-relate, kung anong connection or how can you relate or connect the different concepts, vice versa. Okay? So, fifth step is to generate the conceptual framework in a more presentable way. So, let me give you an example. So, I have here a research title. So, example, step 1 was to study your topic. Let's just say this is the topic represented by a research title. So, the title here is How Climate Change Affects the Lives of Humans. Let's just say this is a qualitative study and you are going to create a conceptual framework. So, remember that this is titled How Climate Change Affects the Lives of Humans. So, the step 2 would be for you to create a thesis statement. So, the thesis statement, let's just say you created a thesis statement that goes like this. So, ganito siya. Climate change affects the lives of all kinds of humans characterized by the increasing sea level, temperature, the amount of carbon emission, and the amount of rainfall. So, if you can see, yung title natin, yung topic natin is represented by this statement which is thesis statement na nagre-represent ng kung anong issue yung iniimbestigahan natin na may kaugnayan siyempre sa ating research topic. So, the third step is for us to identify the concepts. So, based on the thesis statement, you can already identify the different concepts or variables, yung quantitative study that is involved in your study. So, I have here the climate change, and then the humans. It could be the experiences of human. Anyway, this is just an example. The experiences of humans, let's just say the livelihood of humans affected by the climate change. Because let's just say they are close to the sea, for example. And also, there are also specific concepts that characterize the climate change, which are the sea level, temperature, the amount of carbon emission, and the amount of rainfall. So, the third step now is to identify the concepts. So, successfully, these are the concepts involving the study. So, this is the fourth step. So, we are to relate the concepts. So, we already identified the concept, and now we are going to relate the different concepts, which are the climate change, the sea level, temperature, amount of carbon emission, and the amount of rainfall. So, I put here the arrows to relate the different concepts to each other, and I decided that these concepts are not related vice versa. I mean, yung sea level, hindi siya nakaka-apekto sa climate change, but rather yung climate change yung nakaka-apekto sa sea level. So, kung siguro pwedeng dalawang araw, merong araw dito, tapos meron ding araw dito, so pwede din. So, it would be based on the preferences ng researcher. Okay, and the same goes sa araw na ito. So, step 5 would be, of course, the final step would be for you to create the final graphical representation of your conceptual framework, which is the one that dapat nating ilagay doon sa ating research paper. So, this is how it may look like. So, step 5. So, we are now to generate the conceptual framework. So, unang-una na nilalagay natin is the climate change. Di ba? So, I'll put arrows. So, I have there arrows corresponding the different variables that characterize the climate change, which of course, those concepts will affect the humans. Okay. Ganun lang kadali po ang paggawa ng conceptual framework or to generate the conceptual framework. And the same process will be applied in creating the theoretical framework. Only that the things that should be put here are the theories about or the theories involving our study. Okay? So, if you like this video, please do not forget to click like and subscribe and leave a comment if you have any questions about this discussion. And also remember, do not forget that there is no correct or standard format in creating the conceptual framework. That will be all, and bye-bye.
So the video has finished, and then thank you and keep safe, everybody.